Hello, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome in, welcome in. Happy Monday. Hope everybody's doing well. Tonight's story, we're talking about a secret relationship, but ended with gunfire. A married pastor, a woman who believed she was in a real relationship with him, and three chilling words that witnesses say were the shooting happened. You broke my heart. In that moment, a confrontation turned deadly. A man lost his life, a wife survived a traumatic attack, and a woman would face or later face years in prison. But the real question tonight is, how does a situation like this even reach that point? Because tragedies like this don't start with just violence. They start with emotions, they start with relationships, and sometimes they start with people looking for love in the wrong places. Tonight, we're breaking down the Latoshia Daniels case, what happened that day, the relationship behind it, the trial, and the bigger conversation about emotional control, red flags, and accountability. So if you're coming into the live stream, please hit the like button and let me know in the chat. Do you think people sometimes ignore obvious warning signs when emotions are involved? I definitely think so. I spoke about this in many, lives previous that we definitely have to watch those red flags, those warning signs. And definitely people have to watch their emotions and learn how to deal with them, you know? Hola, Shayla. How are you, Shayla? Welcome in, welcome in. So, stories like this always make people stop and think because situations like this don't happen overnight. They build slowly. They start with conversations, they start with emotional connections, and sometimes those connections develop into situations that are already complicated. You know, in this case, it was said that the prosecutors say that Latoshia Daniels had been involved in a relationship with Pastor Brodes Perry, a married man, for around 2 years. 2 years of communication, 2 years of emotional investment, 2 years of expectations. Hey, Tommy Gigi says, that pizza look good, girl. So, yeah, 2 years of expectations. And when people invest that much emotionally into a relationship, especially one that's complicated from the beginning, walking away can be very difficult. And in this case, the emotions got the best of Latasha Daniels, you know? So let's start by talking about the people involved in this case. As you guys see on the screen, the gentleman here was Pastor Brodes, Pastor Brodes Perry, and he was a married man from Tennessee. When people hear the word pastor, there's usually a certain, expectation attached to that role, right? When People hear that word, you think automatically that there should be some kind of honesty, integrity. But people expect someone in that position to represent moral leadership, to set an example, to guide others. But as we know, people's personal lives can sometimes be very different from how they appear in public, you know? Hey, Lily, sis, what's going on, girl? Welcome in, welcome in. But, this is a serious case, and a sad one, too. Another case of people letting emotions, run high, not knowing how to deal with those emotions. Don't another, you know, incident that happened because of not knowing how to deal with rejection. So then we have Tabitha Perry, his wife, who survived the shooting. And imagine what that must have been like. Discovering that your husband had a secret relationship for 2 years and then experiencing a violent situation in your own home. Just imagine that. And then we have Latosha Daniels. Latosha Daniels, the one, of course, right here on the left. That's her. She has her prison uniform on in that pic. That was her. That is her. The woman prosecutors say had been involved in a relationship with a pastor for around 2 years. And that relationship is where this story begins. Hey, Christina, how are you? Welcome in. Thanks for joining. I hope everybody hit that like button for me. And of course, hit subscribe if you haven't. Yeah, so this is where this story begins. One thing in this case, reminds me of is something people say all the time. Looking for love in all the wrong places.
Mommy,
sometimes people
I like Minecraft.
meet someone who makes them feel understood. Hi, Miguel. So yeah, looking for love in all the wrong places. This love triangle definitely says it all. Definitely, you know, sometimes people meet someone who make them feel understood. They feel appreciated. They feel like someone finally sees them. But then they discover something important and something that should have stopped you in your tracks. And you know what that is? That person is already married. Once you find out that person is married, that should have been the biggest red flag, and it should have made her stop in her tracks. She should have said nope. And she probably, even though she probably already knew it because most pastors are married. But, if she did find out after they started, definitely should have just stopped and just found somebody else. Thanks, Miguel. We're doing good. Hope you're doing well as well. So between already married or already involved in someone else, definitely that should be a red flag. And instead of walking away, some people convince themselves that the situation is different. They say things like their marriage is basically over. They're only staying together for the kids. They're going to leave soon. But the truth is, when someone is still married, that situation already comes with emotional complications. And why put yourself in that kind of predicament? Why? Love yourself more. Sometimes people stay in those situations far longer than they should. One thing I want to talk about also tonight is red flags in relationships, because usually situations like this don't happen without warning signs. And we have to pay attention. I always say this: pay attention to those red flags. They're very important. And if you realize them from the beginning, you'll save yourself a lot of heartache, a lot of time, a lot of unneeded energy, you know? Yes, nothing good could ever come from sleeping around with a married person. You are right about that, you know? But for example, if someone tells you they're married and um they say their relationship is basically over, that's already complicated. If that relationship has to say a secret, that's another red flag, and a big one. If someone promises a future, but their life has actually changed, that's another warning sign. But when emotions are involved, people sometimes overlook those signs. Now, let me ask, you guys something. Have you ever seen someone ignore obvious red flags in a relationship because they were emotionally attached? Or maybe that has been you. Let me know. Have you? And those of you on the replay, let me know that too. Um, have you ever seen someone ignore obvious red flags in a relationship because they were already emotionally attached? I definitely have. I've seen it. Um, I've been in it. You know, I, I've definitely ignored red flags because my emotions, were already attached to that person, you know? Hey, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Mark says, don't sleep around for any reason. You damage your soul. Yes, and I believe that. I think that's a fact. Absolutely, because the relationship is not over yet, regardless of separation or not. Someone mostly still has feelings, just going to cause a lot of trouble. Yep. Trouble, heartache, and in this case, death, being unalived.
Yes, it was.
Yes, and the damage was was far worse than they could ever imagine. Yep. So in 2019, Daniels drove from Arkansas to Tennessee to confront the pastor. Driving across state lines already tells you that those emotions were running high as hell. You know, this wasn't just a random encounter. This was, something. This was someone going to, have a serious conversation. Well, and that serious conversation definitely led to something way worse than just a conversation. Sorry, guys. Hold on 1 minute. All right, guys. Sorry about that. Yeah, so she drove across state lines. You already know that was serious. And that already, if you're willing to go across state lines, go far distance to confront somebody, you should already know that your emotions are high and you should really think about what you're doing. But sometimes your emotions are just, so out of control. You black out. You don't realize what you're doing in that moment, you know? And according to these reports that are out there, when she arrived at the home, there was a conversation, but at some point, it escalated. Prosecutors say that Daniels then pulled out the weapon and powed the pastor multiple times. He died from those injuries. And when his wife tried to help him, guess what happened? She was also shot. But thankfully, she survived. Yeah. So she not only shot Pastor Brodes, but she also shot his wife. So let me pause for a second because something else about this situation really stands out. And, later in the stream, I also want to talk about something that I think a lot of people experience but don't always recognize in the moment. The biggest red flags people ignore when they get emotionally involved with somebody who's already married. Because when you look at stories like this, it's rarely just one moment where everything goes wrong. Usually there are warning signs along the way, And sometimes people overlook those signs because their emotions are already involved. So later in the stream, we're going to be talking about those, warning signs and why complicated relationships can spiral out of control. But first, let's continue to just break down what happened in this case. Sad, sad, sad. What a just a sad story. So one detail that really stands out during the trial was testimony that Daniels allegedly said that, she said, "You broke my heart." What she's saying that Pastor Brodes broke her heart. Now, when people hear that statement, it immediately makes the story feel very emotional because heartbreak is something, almost everyone has experienced at some point in life. People have been lied to, people have been cheated on, people have invested time, emotions, and energy into relationships that didn't work out. I know I have. So when people hear that phrase, some people immediately just um, think about their own experiences, especially experiences with heartbreak. But here's the reality that the judge pointed out during the sentencing: heartbreak cannot justify violence. No matter how painful something is emotionally, taking someone's life is not a response to heartbreak. And I think this is an important moment in the story to really pause and reflect on that, you know, because it's true. Heartbreak does not justify unaliving somebody. Definitely not. You have to learn how to deal with your emotions. You don't know how to deal with rejection? do not get into a relationship because you don't know what's going to be the outcome of that relationship. Hey, JC. Okay. Thank you. I mean, this is not going to be a long one, so I'll probably be gone by the time you come back, but it's all good. Enjoy your panel. So because sometimes when emotions getting intense, people stop, thinking clearly. They stop thinking about consequences. They stop thinking about their futures. They don't even think about their futures in that moment. You know, their emotions are running high. They freaking see probably red. They're not seeing at all. Everything, can you imagine her driving on the highway, going to see him? You think the only thing that she's thinking about is confronting them, you know? She couldn't take it that the relationship ended. She really thought that he was gonna either, be in a relationship with her and his wife, or that he was gonna leave his wife for her. And when that didn't happen, she took matters into her own hands, you know? But the moment when someone picks up a weapon, everything changes, you know? And I've definitely seen people react to heartbreak in a way that has shocked me, you know? Not necessarily violence, but, anger, obsession, extreme, what, like extreme emotional, like reactions. And of course, crying like crazy, because who the heck, you know, wants to go through that, especially after 2 years. You think that the relationship's going somewhere, and then to find out it's not, that must have been heartbreaking for her, for anybody. You take your time, you deal with somebody, you know, and then for it to be over, I could definitely understand, but that's still not right to go and unalive them, but heartbreak can push people into that emotional state that they're not used to handling. And that's why emotional maturity and emotional control are so important in relationships. When someone doesn't know how to process rejection or disappointment, they can spiral. And in this case, she definitely spiraled out of control. And another important thing, to talk about in this case is the psychology of secret relationships. Because no good comes from secret relationships. Let's be real. None at all. Because relationships that are hidden, can sometimes feel more intense than normal relationships. They feel more passionate because you're hiding something. Sometimes it just feels more exciting. And even though that's not good, and in the moment, it's not good, but because when you are together, it's just more, intense, more passionate, more loving. It's like those emotions get out of control and they intensify so much. Think about it. When a relationship is secret, there's excitement, there's risk, you know, and people love risk. There's a sense that the relationship is, special or forbidden. And sometimes that intensity can make people believe that the connection is stronger than it actually is. But it doesn't last long. Usually, it does not last long. Things change. That people, especially when you're in a relationship or married, you start to prioritize your family more. But the intensity doesn't always mean something is healthy either. So you have to think about those, if you're ever in a secret relationship or think about being in a secret relationship, there's definitely going to be consequences at the end. And somebody usually gets hurt. In this case, Pastor Brodes lost his life. And then sometimes the secrecy actually hides problems. And why would you want to be the mistress of somebody that's married, or I don't know what you call the man when he's the side guy? I don't know. But either way, being the second, to the main person is never enough. What's going on, Smooth? What's going on, Smooth? Haven't seen you around in a while, brother. What's going on? Nice to see you. I was thinking about you the other day. I think it was yesterday. I said I haven't seen you a while. I haven't seen you around in a while. Yeah, so this story is sad. A pastor got unalive in a love triangle, you know? So when relationships are built in secret, there are often things people don't see fully. They might only see the version of the person that shows up in those private moments. They don't see the full picture of that person's life. They don't see who that person really is. And unreal that can create unrealistic expectations about the future. And Latasha had a lot of expectations in this case. She had a lot of, unfortunately, she had a lot of expectations. And when they broke up, she couldn't handle that breakup, you know? So, what do you guys think? Do you think that secret relationships sometimes feel more intense than normal ones? And do you think that intensity can refuse people emotionally? That can confuse people emotionally? Sometimes people confuse emotional intensity with love, but relationships also require stability, honesty, transparency. Hey, Saras, how are you? Without those things, stability, honesty, and transparency, emotional intensity can eventually turn into emotional chaos. So let's see if I find one thing. And one thing that stands out in this case also is that there aren't really any photos of them together publicly. That shows just how private this relationship was. And sometimes when relationships are hitting like that, emotions can become very intense because everything is happening behind the scenes. I try to look for pictures of them together, but there are none. Everything was separate. There wasn't any. He, I say, I can't say she, but he was very careful. He was very, very careful. So this part of the conversation also, you know, creates kind of a debate, and it might make some people, uncomfortable, but it's, okay to talk about. When situations like this happen, people often ask, who is responsible? Is it the married person who cheated? Is it the person who knowingly continued the relationship? Or do both people share responsibility? Because in many situations like this, both people are making choices, you know? The married person is responsible for their vows and they made a commitment. But the person who knows someone is married also has to make a decision, or also has a decision to make. They can choose to walk away or they can choose to stay. And sometimes people stay because they believe that something's going to change, that the relationship is somehow going to become or eventually become real, you know? So if someone tells you they're married, but but says the relationship is over, are you gonna believe them, or are you just gonna walk away? Are you gonna continue that relationship? Let me know. Those of you that are watching now, those of you that are watching the replay, let me know what you guys think. Those questions are open to everybody and anybody. Or do you think people sometimes stay because they believe things will change? Situations like this show how complicated relationships can become when boundaries are crossed, when boundaries aren't set, when you start a situationship from the beginning. So when the case went to trial, prosecutors presented their version of what happened. They argued that Daniels intentionally caused the death of the pastor. The defense, on the other hand, tried to present a different perspective about the emotional circumstances leading up to the incident. And this is where juries have a very difficult job. Just imagine Latasha came, to court with those emotions. When you're love is a powerful thing. When you're in love, you just can't deal with it. It especially getting rejected by the person you love, you know? They but the jury has to listen to both sides. Hold on, guys. I'm sorry. So yeah, the jury has to listen to both sides and determine what they believe happened. Um, you know, there was a point that Latasha was telling that that the pastor's wife actually that they were actually in a well that the pastor and his wife were in a open, and the wife actually denies it denied it. So I'm gonna watch put up a little video of
throughout all of those videos.
I'm just rewinding it a little bit.
Did Latasha reach out and apologize to you after she threatened to commit suicide?
No,
Did you ever have a conversation with her about that?
no.
Throughout all of those videos, it's very convincing talking about those things. Would you agree?
I would agree.
And none of it was true.
No.
I want to talk to you about your relationship with Brodes, okay?
Okay.
You all together married for about 5 years. How long did you date before you got married?
About a year.
You were a second wife.
Correct.
And at no point during your relationship with you, at least, did he discuss his watchers or no, no.
No.
Brodes was a pastor
Correct.
in Little Rock that was at St. Mark's. So it's a big church.
Yes.
Did he take trips with the church
Yes.
often?
When you say trips, like international trips or?
Both international and local, Israel,
Yeah,
Savannah, El
often.
Dorado. Did he take those with the other pastors?
Sometimes.
And he also took them sometimes with other church members, like the church groups.
I can recall one time, maybe a time or two, where there was like a training conference or something like that.
So they did the whole church group was for Israel, right?
Correct.
Okay. And when he got the job at Mississippi Boulevard, that's a big deal to be a pastor there, right?
Again,
It's a big church here.
it's a big church.
And now I'm direct. I thought you had said that he didn't ever do counseling for
St. Mark?
at St. Mark's, but I thought you told the police that he sometimes did. You just didn't know that he counseled Latasha.
So in this case, Daniels faces charges, or faced, because it is over already. She faced serious charges, including first degree murder. First degree murder usually, requires proof that the act was premeditated, meaning there was planning involved, but the jury ultimately convicted her of second degree murder instead. That means the jury believed the death was intentional, but did not find enough evidence to prove full meditation. premeditation, sorry. And trials like this often raise questions about how juries interpret emotional situations. So let's continue to hear. The wife, she's actually a surviving victim because Latasha did aim at her.
I never known him to do counseling.
Did he ever tell you that he counseled Latasha?
No,
But you knew that she ended up getting divorced.
I did know that.
Now I want to talk to you about Latasha, okay?
Okay.
You knew her from church, and that was St. Mark's in Little Rock.
Correct.
She was a life group leader.
Yes.
What's a life group leader?
It's a person that leads a group of people that get together and do Bible study.
And that was a group that Brodes was over, right?
Correct.
And before his relationship with Latasha started, this was a tight-knit group, right?
Yes.
He was very involved with that group.
Yes.
And it was about 7 or 8 people.
In that group, there were probably 6 or 7 groups. Yeah.
But in that particular, the group that Latasha was in,
Yeah.
a couple of people.
Mhm.
And those groups were selected from the whole church membership, right?
Based on who showed interest. It wasn't like, we want you, people came and showed interest. Yeah,
There's thousands of church members at St. Mark's.
sure.
And I think, what about 40 or 50 people were selected to be life group leaders?
I guess. I don't know for sure.
And that's okay.
Yeah, so basically, because this one does go on for a little while, basically she says they were not in a open relationship, even though that's what an open relationship, even though that was what was said. And she did have a relationship with him for 2 years. So I know if you haven't heard about this case, you're probably wondering, so was she convicted? How long? If she was convicted, what was her sentencing? Because I know that was a question I had, so let's hear it.
and needs assessment. So I'm going to go into more detail on the court's consideration. So the first thing is to determine the sentencing range. And so the defense asks for an especially mitigated, that she be sentenced as a especially mitigated offender. And the state says that because the court finds an enhancement factor that should not be applied, according to Tennessee Code Annotated 40-35109, the court may find the defendant is an especially mitigated offender if one, the defendant has no prior felony convictions, what the defendant does not, and the court finds mitigating but no enhancement factors. In this case, the court does find an enhancement factor for the possession of a weapon. So the court finds that the defendant is not an especially mitigated offender. Therefore, the range of punishment on a second-degree murder would be 15 to 25 years, the standard range for an offender, and reckless endangerment, a misdemeanor, that would carry 11 months and 29 days in jail. And so one of the things the court has considered is the evidence presented at the trial and the sentencing hearing. And so the evidence at the trial was that the defendant was having an affair with a married pastor. And at the time, the defendant was also married. They had been in a relationship for about 2 years. The defendant and the victim, on the day of the murder, the defendant.
And I just wanted to pause there because when you're using another somebody's video, you do have to pause for commentary. But if you guys, of course, I'm not gonna play everything because these are someone else's videos, and they're very long, and there's multiple videos. But if you look at from when, you know, the victim, I mean her statement, the apology to the family, everything like that. It was very, very emotional. At sentencing, her entire family was there, her entire family. She had such a big crowd there. So you can tell that, even though what happened in the situation, and she did unalive somebody, that before that happened, that she was a pretty decent person. She was very loved, you know, and this is a very sad circumstance, and, you know, but it's definitely no reason to unalive someone. I could never, yes, I feel, sorry for her because she did seem remorseful, but, she did take someone's life. So it's too late to be remorseful then. She should have thought of that when she was driving to their house.
The victim spoke on the Confide app where the victim told the defendant that their time had come to an end. And so after the defendant received that information,
Hey Salem, welcome in, welcome in. Please, I hope you guys hit that like button. I hope you hit that subscribe. Don't be afraid to engage. If you're watching the replay, please engage. Let me know what you think about this case. Have you ever been in a relationship with someone, was married or in a relationship? Did you ever have to deal with rejection? How did you handle it? Do you know someone that dealt with, being rejected, or was in a relationship or
went to a gun store. She purchased a gun in Sherwood, Arkansas. From the proof at trial, she's on camera, purchased the gun.
Sorry. And hey Terry, welcome in. Thank you for being here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for dropping that copyright disclaimer under section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purpose such as criticism, comment, news, reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research.
Giving the sales rep her ID, signing any paperwork that she needs. And then the defendant, when she was in Sherwood, Arkansas, drove to Memphis, which is over 2 hours from Sherwood, Arkansas, 2 hours from Memphis. And so the court finds that, you know, the defendant's actions were deliberate. And although she wasn't found guilty of first-degree murder, her actions that she showed, and there was proof from Dr. Bidding that she had major depressive disorder, and also that she had some suicidal ideations. And that was the defense version of what happened. And obviously the jury rejected that. But Also, Dr. Bidding said that her conduct was could be even if you have depression, you can still be sequential, intentional, and deliberate in your actions, and it appears that way to the court because the defendant drove over 2 hours, went to the
Yep. Drove 2 hours. In those 2 hours, I think she definitely had time to think. That's, you know, 2 hours. Like, even if you, when you first speed off in the car, you're angry and mad and emotional, it took 2 hours. You, I don't understand. How do you still stay in that, anger stage or state for 2 hours driving? At any time she should have been like, what the hell am I doing? Did she had not she I don't know if she had any conversations with anybody on the way there, that could have told her, girl, pull over. What are you doing? Do not go over there. 2 hours to think of what she was doing. 2 hours driving with a weapon, to this pastor's house, a married pastor's house. She had 2 hours to change her mind and make a better choice. But unfortunately, she did not.
victim's home, sat and talked with the victim, shot Mr. Perry several times, emptying the clip. Um, and when the police arrived, she was attempting suicide. But during the entire course of that, the defendant possessed a weapon. Nothing, like Dr. Bennett said, I mean, she could still commit these actions even if she had a major depressive disorder. So the court finds that the nature and circumstance of the offense are serious. The victim was unarmed, and it really just comes down to the fact that the defendant said that the victim would not walk her to her car. And that, I mean, that's senseless, senseless to kill someone because he would not walk her to her car. And although the victim was a pastor who did not treat her right and he broke her heart, a broken heart does not justify someone dying. It just does not justify someone dying. It was just senseless.
Those words, a broken heart does not justify someone dying. Sheesh. And isn't that true? Definitely. Just because you're brokenhearted doesn't mean that you go and unalive someone. And she's very lucky. I mean, as lucky as you could be that she wasn't charged with first degree premeditated murder. Because to me, it was premeditated. I think they really gave her some leniency because she seemed remorseful. Her family was there, but I don't know how it didn't, make it to first degree because she had to drive that all that way for 2 hours with the weapon, went into the house or knocked on the door, went into she's lucky that it was only, I mean, not only, but that she was charged with second degree murder, sentenced and to 20 years and not the rest of her life.
When typically when this happens, the relationship is over. You know, both parties go their separate ways. But in this case, the defendant killed the victim because her heart was broken, and so the court finds that the nature and circumstances of this offense warrant a lengthy sentence. Again, the statistical information shows that 19 years is a typical sentence for a standard range one offender, in the court would give that some consideration And looking at the nature and circumstance of the offense, the court is going to give that great weight for a lengthy sentence. Also, the court has to consider enhancement factors. And the first factor that the state raises is that the offense involved one or more victims. And the court finds that that factor does not apply. The fact that another person or persons are present when a crime is committed standing alone is not sufficient to trigger this factor. In this case, the two victims who were present in the home were Miss Perry and Mr. Perry. And the defendant was convicted separately for her conduct for each one of those victims. And so the court finds that that factor is not appropriate in this case. The other factor that the state relies on is the personal injuries inflicted upon or the damage to the property sustained by or taken by the victims was particularly great. The court finds that it's not applicable to second-degree murder because it's inherent in the offense. It's an element of the offense. The injury was death, and so the court finds that that factor is not applicable. And then also the court finds it's not applicable to reckless endangerment because it has to be something that is over and beyond. Although the Ms. Perry said that she had pain in her shoulder, the court doesn't find that that is over and beyond what someone would be expected. The type of harm or injury that is greater than what is expected if someone was shot. So the court finds that that factor is not applicable to this case. Next, the state asks for the enhancement factors. The defendant possessed or employed a firearm, explosive device, or other deadly weapon during the commission of the offense. And the court finds that this factor does apply, and the defense concedes that it does apply. But the defense asks that the court not give great weight to this factor.
So, one moment of anger changed multiple lives forever. You know, a family lost someone they loved, a wife lost her husband, a wife experienced trauma, and another life will now be spent behind bars for many, many, many years. You definitely have to make sure you make the right decisions. If you know that you're not going to be, the only one in that relationship, if you know that you're more committed than the other person, walk away. If after, not even, I wouldn't even be with a married person, but I say if after, a couple months, because it's true, people could be separated and whatever, but if you don't see any actions, it's time to step away and, find somebody that you deserve, that is going to put you first.
But second-degree murder can be accomplished without a weapon. And so the court is going to give that some weight. And the court finds this factor applies because the defendant was seen on camera purchasing a gun. The defendant drove to Memphis from Sherwood, Arkansas with the gun, went to the victim's house with the gun, shot Mr. Perry, killed him, emptied the clip, and shot Miss Perry. And when police arrived, she had the gun in her hand. So the court gives this factor great weight against the defendant. She possessed the handgun throughout the entirety of carrying out this offense. So the court finds that that factor applies. So the court's given that great weight. Next, the defense filed for several mitigating factors.
All right. So this was long. So I'm not gonna play the whole thing because it is long. Um, but you guys get the gist of everything. And like I said, she was sentenced to 20 years, second degree murder instead of first degree. So the jury, believed the death was intentional, but did not find enough evidence to prove full, premeditation. You could taste it. Sorry, guys. So yeah, 20 years in prison, for not knowing how to. You like it? Great. That yeah, so for not knowing how to deal with emotions, for not knowing how to deal with rejections, So now you have to spend 20 years in prison. A whole different lifestyle, you know? So this case highlights something very important that people don't talk about enough: emotional control. Everyone experiences rejection. Everyone experiences heartbreak. Everyone experiences disappointment in relationships. But emotional maturity is about learning how to handle those feelings without destroying your life or anyone else's. Because emotions can be powerful: jealousy, rejection, betrayal. Those feelings can make people act in ways they normally wouldn't. But the moment someone chooses violence, the situation crosses a line that cannot be undone. And in this case, it definitely crossed the line and someone lost their life. And that's why emotional boundaries are so important. Am I right? People really have to have some emotional, you know, responsibility also. You have to learn how to deal with your emotions. It's just, sad. Sad. And let me put his picture up one more time. Rest in peace, Pastor Brodes Perry. Unfortunately, a bad choice, a bad decision
Oh no.
led to him losing his life.
No. No.
Jackson, a part of, trying to do lives or anything with a child. But anyway, guys. So when you really think about where this story began, it started with something that happens every day. A relationship.
Then.
When emotions spiral and people don't know how to deal with those emotions, the consequences can become permanent.
No.
So do you think people ignore red flags because they want to love so badly? Should people completely avoid relationships with married partners? That's a big yes to me. But why do people stay in messy relationships for so long? And why do they start them in the beginning? Why don't they run from the first red flag? When somebody shows you who they are, please believe them. Please believe them. Know your worth. It's not worth it. And it's not worth for a few seconds of a bad choice to ruin your life forever. So if you've made it to the end of this live stream, I want to thank you. I definitely want to thank you. You know, I appreciate you. Please hit the like button, subscribe, and share the stream. And I'll definitely see you guys in the next live. Thank you. Bye.